Welcome to Player Profiler Prime Time News on Player Profiler Now. We are here to break down the latest from the NFL Scouting Combine. I'm your host, Mike Lindberg, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Coach Jeremiah. Today, we're diving into the standout performances, the shocking disappointments, and everything in between as we analyze how this year's Combine is shaking up the NFL Draft. From Bhayshul Tuten's explosive speed to his heated debate between TreVeyon Henderson and Quinshon Judkins for the RB2 role in this rookie draft, you're going to get all the insights you need. Plus, we'll discuss how draft capital and landing spots will ultimately determine the fantasy football outlook of these rising stars. Jeremiah, let's get this party started. Now let's take a closer look at the quarterback performances from the 2025 Combine. We saw some impressive showings, maybe, or a few moments that just left us questioning where these certain prospects land. Now, Jeremiah, let's get your QB recap, buddy.
Hey, Jamie, love to see you. It is prime time. Let's talk about this. This is very simple. At quarterback, the stock up is Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders, Jackson Dart. Everyone in life can succeed. However, what is linear to me may not be linear to you. I liken the way the Combine broke down. Ready, Mike? You'll like this. Being a closer at a busy restaurant as a server, Ward and Sanders are the closers. They get the weekend shifts, the most tables. They make the most money. Now it comes to being a Thursday the next week. Ward and Sanders want the night off to get ready for their weekend. Thursday is a little bit of a pre-weekend vibe, a little bit extra busy versus Mondays and Tuesdays, night shifts. And in steps Jackson Dart to be the closer, getting the extra turns in rotation and making the most money at the end of the night. If you've ever worked in a kitchen at a restaurant, you understand everything I just said. All three quarterbacks in this scenario win, and growth occurs for Jackson Dart. Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders, their path is linear in that they've gotten the word that they didn't need to throw at the NFL Combine. Their college tape shows to that. And I think that's where things are going with the pro days, with the direction of the NFL Combine. You've seen what I've done. What else do you need to know other than an interview and some medicals? Players are having more leverage. We may see a little bit of money impact how things go in the future to the player's benefit. Jackson Dart, his linear path was getting to showcase his throwing ability at the NFL Combine without Ward and Sanders showing out. By getting to see Dart in isolation from Ward and Sanders, there will be scouts and GMs who circle Dart as their guy in round one. Did the stock up require an extra effort from Jackson Dart with another day's work? Absolutely. But you ask Jackson Dart, he's more than happy if it boosts his draft stock. For the rest of the QBs, you look at the 40 and all the different tests on the NFL Combine results. Cook, Shaw, and Hennigan. It sounds like an Irish law firm. Nothing remarkable about their 40 times. Nothing about their throwing that made me think, I'm going to put them in some elite tier. Ohio State's Will Howard is somebody that we do like. Came in with a 31.5-inch vertical. Did the broad jump, the 3-cone, and shuttle. But his throwing day wasn't necessarily the best. I'm not going to discount or throw him away from where he is already in my rankings. We got to see Jalen Milroe throw. He looked like he was out there suffering. Throwing in isolation for Jalen Milroe is not his full game. So it isn't going to give you the full Jalen Milroe experience. I'm not going to double count or bank anything for Milroe based off of him throwing at the NFL Combine. No one tuned into the Combine to see how Jalen Milroe would throw. We've already had that assessment that he's an unrefined passer and is going to need work at that. So the Combine didn't change that for me. It didn't lower anything for Jalen Milroe. It just reconfirmed what we already knew. For Milroe and Will Howard, though, I want to see as a fantasy gamer, draft capital, as that's going to dictate my fantasy football interest. For Will Howard, here's some teams I'd like him to go to. The Packers, the Dolphins, as a viable backup. You put him in the event Jordan Love, Tua Tagovailoa get hurt. Will Howard would be just that right guy who can keep them from tanking. We saw it definitely with the Miami Dolphins. It was sink or swim. Haha, Dolphins. Sink or swim without Tua leading things. And then a third team for Will Howard. I wouldn't mind Biggs' team, the Las Vegas Raiders. For Jalen Milroe, he can go just about anywhere, as he won't be selected as a starter. Then I am simply treating him in Dynasty, an upside backup quarterback in Superflex formats, where all I care about is fantasy production. I have no misunderstanding about Jalen Milroe being a viable passer or real-life NFL quarterback. It's a lot like Justin Fields. We know what we're getting at a certain point. So at the top, things are crystallizing with the big three: Ward, Sanders, Jackson Dart. It just took an extra day of Jackson Dart vividly showing us how good of a thrower he is. And there's your first round. And of course, it's going to inform the first round of these rookie mocks. We've had rookie mocks where Shedeur Sanders slides a little bit. There's a couple picks extra before Cam Ward goes. Jackson Dart, late first, sometimes early second. You're going to get the three of them to truncate into the first round, most likely in the top 8 picks, maybe 10, depending on how high they are on the running backs. So a good overall day. To me, though, a mostly non-eventful day, but because there isn't as much movement, there's a lot more going on behind the scenes. So if you can read the room, you can understand the read on these quarterbacks, and that's the read that I have for them. Mike, tell us about this running back class. Bhayshul Tuten, we got a lot. What do you have for us?
Yeah, you've probably been waiting, folks, for this breakdown, because it's what the talk about the combine was these running backs and how impressive and deep this class really is. The combine, it provided an exciting showcase for these running backs with several standout performances that could reshape this upcoming draft. The absence of Boise State's Ashton Jeanty, considered a potential first-round pick, it did leave a gap, but what made up for it? Virginia Tech's Bhayshul Tuten stepped up as the surprise star of the weekend. Tuten posted an impressive 4.32 40-yard dash, the fastest time of all the running backs, showcasing his elite speed coupled with his solid college stats. 1,159 yards, 15 touchdowns. Last season, Tuten's combine performance has him trending upwards in dynasty rankings, likely making him a serious contender for teams needing a dynamic playmaker in their backfield. I saw a mock draft go today for a rookie mock. Tuten went at the end of the first round. So that's how much this guy is getting steamed up right now. Another major winner was Kansas State's DJ Giddens, known for his powerful running style. Giddens impressed with a 4.34 40-yard dash, which exceeded expectations. He also finished second in both the vertical jump and the broad jump, highlighting his explosiveness. Scouts had concerns about Giddens' speed, projecting him as a 4.5 to 4.6 range. Well, he proved the doubters wrong. His combine performance firmly placed him among the most intriguing prospects. With proven ability to carry the workload at Kansas State, Giddens could easily hear his name called in the earlier rounds of this draft. Now, to the meat and potatoes here, TreVeyon Williams and Quinshon Judkins, two of the most well-rounded running backs from the 2024 college season, made waves at the combine. Even though they didn't post jaw-dropping times, Henderson ran a solid 4.43. He impressed with his smooth pass-catching ability and improved pass protection. Judkins clocked in at a 4.51. wow, was also praised for his quick feet, his solid receiving skills. Both players were part of a powerful Ohio State backfield last year, combining for over 2,000 yards, 24 touchdowns. Their shared workload in college may have kept them individual numbers a little bit more modest, but they both proved they had all the tools to thrive as feature backs in the NFL. Now, on the other hand, here, some prospects saw their stock fall. Oklahoma State's Ollie Gordon, who stands at a sturdy 6'2", 226 pounds, ran a disappointing 4.61 40-yard dash. While his size and power are assets, especially as a downhill runner, his lack of burst compared to the other backs at the combine may have hurt his chances of moving up the draft boards. And on the other hand of the ball, it's really tough to know where we, place Dylan Sampson after failed to run the 40-yard dash due to that reported hamstring injury. His absence from relevant event has raised some concerns, though he has impressed in other drills. The uncertainty about his health and lack of experience as a receiver could limit his appeal for teams looking for a well-rounded back. And finally, two guys that were highly touted entering the combine, Caleb Johnson and Cam Scatabo, all failed to stand out in Indianapolis. Johnson's 4.57 40-yard dash, it was solid, but his 10-yard split was the slowest among the top backs, which raises questions about his explosiveness. Scatabo, who had a hamstring issue, didn't participate in drills, potentially missing an opportunity to prove his worth. So their underwhelming performances left Johnson and Scatabo to do with some work to improve their draft stock headed into 2025 draft. So looking ahead here, got some pretty good indications on where we're headed in this, running back room. The top five is kind of like, solidified itself a little bit more. Caleb Johnson might have worked himself out of, the top four now after that showing with how much you saw out of Omarion Hampton. I didn't get to mention his relative athletic score was off the charts. And then when you look at how Judkins and Henderson showed as well, they only improved their draft stock. Jared, what do you have to say about that, man?
I absolutely love everything that you're saying. Cam Scapo really did hurt himself with not running the 40. That was just that one peculiarity that you had out there that you wanted scratched. But to your point with DJ Giddens, a 4.43, just laughable in this draft class. He's a guy who goes anywhere in the second into the third round of these rookie drafts. It's funny that you say with Bhayshul Tuten. Jamie has a question, and it kind of goes into what I wanted to speak to. What you said, Mike, late round one. I've got Tuten in some pre-combine data, ADP in 38, just so much further down the board, rookie ADP. Tuten is shooting up. What will happen that can fade and loosen up the grip on that skyrocketing prisoner of the moment Tuten hype would be the fact that Tuten could be still a day 3 pick. Does it boost his shot at being a day 2 pick in round 2 or 3? Absolutely. But the good read on this draft class is a fact that if you have a player, let's say it's RJ Harvey, Rashard Smith, if they roll as a day 3 pick, you're not going to ding them the way you would in other seasons. So the beauty is a day 3 pick, it's not a knock on players. Now, psychologically, though, if any of these players get pegged down to being a day 3 pick, it could still play with some of our psychology. But I would say if you want to be a shark out there, make sure that you still stick to the fact that these priors where we have these running backs as being phenomenal, you keep that energy and you're not thrown off the scent when they get day 3 capital thinking that it's a bad thing. We're going to have teams that are going to surprise us, that are going to select 2 running backs when you expect or hope for 1. You're going to have backfields where, why did they add somebody here? Remember last year, Achane, Mostert. Why is Jalen Wright going there? It throws a little dent in things. If the Seattle Seahawks with Ken Walker and Zach Charbonnet added somebody, just a different type of archetype. What if it was a Brashard Smith? Just a different type of weapon. How bummed would we be for that entire backfield? But we have to understand that there's so much talent to be had out there. There may be more players than chairs, is a conundrum that we'll come up with. So can Tuten fall? Absolutely. But let it cool off some and let the psychology of what people have done in prior years help you gain a divergent advantage in the fact that, Mike, you and I know not to over panic on a day 3 pick. Those tropes that we normally have, don't fall for them, because this is a non-standard year for the running back class.
Yeah, man. I'm hearing a buzz here from the FastDraft Origins. Tell us about that, Jer.
Rookie. It's all about rookie talk in fantasy football right now. So why not go use all that knowledge to do something other than a mock draft? Chris Jimino won $8,000 with just 2 teams last year, and each draft took 5 minutes. That's pretty good ROI. You can start doing rookie drafts for money today on FastDraft. The Origins tournament is live. It is the place to go and monetize your knowledge of rookies, and use your favorite player profiler host promo code for a $25 deposit match. Now let's go start drafting faster.
There you have it. Use promo code Coach Retzlaff 1. Mike is up there in Canada. He wants to have the itchy trigger finger for playing FastDraft. So get in there, get your deposit match, get active. The beautiful thing is FastDraft. Uh-oh. Who's coming out of the mirror? It's Jamie. Jamie's going to bust through the mirror when I say FastDraft 3 times fast. How quickly can you get it going? Let's go. DJ Giddens, big riser. What's up, Alex? Hope you're doing well. We love DJ Giddens. Just laughably absurd how good he is. Just in the middle of all this, there's something about DJ Giddens that he's not getting near the hype. Hopefully he'll get that hype into that second half, that second tier, that 6 through 10, even that 6 through 12 running back after the top 5. Really love it.
Jeremiah, I want to test your temperature here on the wide receivers in this class. Now, a lot of them decided not to test, which is kind of like, it's the Podfather talked about it on the 10 takeaways this morning. They really have to do a better job, the NFL, of making these star players play a little bit more, because it would have been awesome to see, a Buka, test or a Tet, you know what I mean? So let's tell us about what you saw in the rundown, because a couple of guys rose up the boards pretty good. Jalen Noel, Jaden Higgins, they had monster day. So break that down for us, man.
Well, let's take a look for excitement, right? Top 5 wideouts in the 40-yard dash. Matthew Golden, a 4.29. You and I had talked about, we mentioned him on the Dynasty Pulse for players we were looking out for risers. You had talked about him on Player Profiler News PrimeTime. And then we have number 2, Dante Thornton Jr., a 4.30. Chimere Dike, a 4.34. Jalen Lane, a 4.34. Arian Smith, a 4.36. My takeaway is that Matthew Golden is the only candidate to be a top 5 wideout in the class from that group. So what does that say about the 40-yard dash? It really doesn't say much, other than Matthew Golden went out there and proved a little bit more for himself. His stock was rising. But those other players, I'm not all of a sudden saying, oh, yeah, I got to get myself some Arian Smith now because he had the 5th best 40-yard dash. I do think that the NFL Combine is getting antiquated. The GPS method and mode is a little more accurate. We knock Harold Fannin Jr. He didn't get necessarily a good break, but we've seen GPS data that shows the miles per hour. We've seen the measured zebra score at the Senior Bowl. Acceleration, deceleration on Harold Fannin Jr. We need to look more at game speed and what players can do. A 4.6 40 isn't the death knell that it used to be. When we see some functionality in the NFL on-field stuff, these players can play faster. Remember, Kyron Williams had a poor combine. Bucky Irving didn't have the best. And look at where they're at in the NFL. So the eye test can be the lie test, but at the same time, when the coaches get these players in, they have the interviews, they have the reputation of what they did in college. I'm not going to read too much into everything that happens with the 40-yard dash or any of the testing. It doesn't change Luther Burden's stock. Luther Burden ran a 4.41. That's good. We don't double count, right? We already knew Luther Burden, 5-star recruit, had a penultimate season where he went off, and then last year didn't do so well. There was a dip, but still a high draft stock for Burden. Trey Harris ran a 4.54 compared to A.J. Brown, who had a 4.49. They're similar. I would just say not the same. Now, you may mention, Mike, Tetairoa McMillan didn't test. He's another linear path player. Tet McMillan doesn't test, doesn't need to. He'll be a top half of the first round pick. He's looking at the top 15 picks. I know Daniel Jeremiah had Tet at 19 overall to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Maybe they got confused, like, hey, let's run up there. We have McMillan on our team. Let's make sure we have him again. Jalen McMillan, Tetairoa McMillan. Why would Tampa Bay be interested in Tet? Granted, we hear about the New England Patriots being interested in Chris Godwin. I would love Godwin back with Baker, but in the meantime, if Tet landed, I would not mind that at all. You'd have two archetype bigger body players in Mike Evans and Tet McMillan. Hey, I guess you got to play on both sides. Who would be the slot man in that instance? Would it be Jalen McMillan? But McMillan doesn't test, doesn't need to. Matthew Golden needed to test, so. And now he may be in the same spot as Tet McMillan is as far as draft capital. So funny enough, the Jackson Dart corollary to the Ward and Sanders corollary, you have the same linear path happening for Tet McMillan and Matthew Golden. It's just, it looks different. Tet didn't have to test. He put on what he put on for wax. Matthew Golden's been a riser throughout last season, and the murmurings were out there. And Matthew Golden absolutely answered the question at the NFL Combine. On the vertical jump, Sam Brown Jr., Jalen Noel, you spoke to Jalen Noel, had a 41.5-inch vert. We liked Jalen Noel prior to the Combine. Sam Brown is nowhere on our radar. We talk about not double counting stats. We do want information, though, to further inform us of either good or bad. So seeing that for Jalen Noel, you absolutely love to see it. I love seeing Jaden Higgins, Noel's teammate, with a 39-inch vertical. Alec Amanor and Trey Harris, 38.5-inch vertical. They're near where you want them to be. Jack Betch, though, here's a funny one, a 34-inch vertical. Is that really changing where we are drafting him in rookie mocks? If he slides in round 3 of mocks, is that so impactful versus the rest of the draft class? Not really. So all in all, just about everybody to me stayed in the same place. The good scores by top wideouts further solidify forward our take. The only divergence that I saw was Matthew Golden's stock continued to soar, but his stock was on the up and up already. This was just something that helped highlight Golden's game more. Now, the elephant in the room, though, kind of like the Cam Scatbo of wide receivers, was Isaiah Bond running the 40, but he really took the biggest fall, which we will get to later, with his 40 not getting near what we wanted with Xavier Worthy. We'll talk about Isaiah Bond a little bit later, but I do want to speak a little bit to your question about players and what they're doing. What does the NFL have to do as far as getting more participation in the NFL Combine? I think they got to pay up. At this point, who has the leverage, the player or the teams? Multiple teams are interested in these players. I think you can make a bigger money event, maybe a specialized Combine Pro Day amongst players in a certain class. Maybe it's Ward and Sanders get together and Jackson Dart. But I think you can monetize, you can have sponsorships, you can have it more of an event that's player-centered. We already do the NFL preseason. We already do NFL games that are player-centered at that point. We are becoming pros. The players are becoming pros. So why not start to treat them, give them a piece of the pie? I think that's something that can get more of that engagement. I love the NFL Combine, but we have to see just something more that's progressive towards what our players have for furthering themselves and having more autonomy in the pocketbook. And it's funny, if you build it, they will come. If you come with the money, players will show. Mike, with the tight ends, deep running back class, and you had a lot to say about them. We say deep tight end class, but are we having to pump the brakes? What do you think?
Yeah, I think that deep tight end class shrunk a little bit after this weekend with seeing some of the performances in, if there is a place where this combine really shows, it's the tight end position. Tight ends, that's where we kind of get our gold from, is finding out how they test, athletically there. And, the last couple tight ends, Bowers, McBride, Laporta, they all had great testing. So if we can really see these, testing happen here, you never know. Tyler Warren opted out. Elijah Arroyo, the injury kept him out. Colson Loveland did not participate. So that left us with a couple of guys that, are the top 3, maybe 4 picks in this draft as far as that position goes. Now, after this weekend, it gets even more cloudy because, a guy like Mason Taylor, he impressed. He skipped the athletic testing, but, that gauntlet that he ran was impressive. That was insane. He had great reviews with that. His fluidity just made him, stand out. Terrence Ferguson, 4.63 speed on that 40-yard dash. He's got jumping ability on that 39-inch vertical, showed a dynamic skill set. So these are kind of 2 prospects that shot their way up the draft boards here, in my opinion. Taylor's performance was especially notable given his decision to forego that testing. But, that smoothness in that gauntlet, that was the talk of the day, essentially, from what I gather from the people that I knew that were at the combine. They said that was a really cool thing to see. Ferguson, who came into the combine with high expectations, he just didn't disappoint. I mentioned that 4.63 40-yard dash. He looked like a potential sleeper pick. Now he's more of looking like a dynamic tight end. His performance could see him rise up the draft boards, particularly in fantasy leagues where, they get tight end premium scoring. His upside in the red zone as a red zone threat is good. He's a playmaker that could translate into immediate value with that combination of speed and vertical jumping ability. However, not all the prospects impress. And actually, it was more of the story of the day, seeing some of the guys fall short, if you will. Disappointing side of things was Bowling Green's Harold Fannin and Texas's Gunnar Helm, who can only be described as pretty much disastrous combine performances at this stage. Fannin, despite an incredible college career, posted a 4.71 40-yard dash, which was well below expectation for a player of his build. He isn't a big guy, so that speed is a big thing people are looking for him. His performance in the agility drills were equally underwhelming, showing little fluidity or separation. So his stock, which is already divided between, the fantasy community, I think is going to be more one-sided now. Meanwhile, Gunnar Helm, it looked like he injured himself on the first 40-yard dash run after we saw some pictures float around the next day on X. So, we're going to be really closely keeping our eye closely on Gunnar Helm on his pro day and see if he can, come back from that disappointing 4.93 40-yard dash. And he was unable to recover from that to salvage his day. So overall, the combine was a tough day for tight ends, with the majority of prospects failing to make a statement. I didn't mention who was it that had a decent day as well? It was
Terrence Ferguson.
Yeah, Ferguson I mentioned, but Joshua Simon, he had a solid showing as well. So another guy that was under the radar headed into the day. Now he has separated himself and he's now on the radar. He ran a 4.65 40. He has a 38-inch vertical. So great metrics here for athleticism for that tight end position. So yeah, that is the combine recap of kind of what we saw there. So folks, if you are enjoying the show, don't miss out on more exclusive content. Subscribe to Player Profiler now on YouTube if you haven't already, or Player Profiler _ or /news. Check out the website, get everything that you need to know, the latest breaking news you'll find, and you're going to stay ahead of the game with us. Now, Jeremiah, one of
Hold
our
on,
favorite.
Mike, we got a question.
Sure.
Jamie says he's seen Fannin dropping. What are your thoughts on him now, Mike? Market wise, what do we do in the event? What do you think is going to happen? I think he's going to drop too, but what do you do with that?
Well, I mean, some people are taking this as a room to like buy Harold Fannin, and they're going to get a value price on him. And I could see that. It really is going to now depend on where he's going to land in the actual draft, and if there's going to be room for him. Because if he didn't test athletically very well, teams are going to be reluctant to put him in there, I think, as that blocker. I mean, he's not a very big guy. He's still very young. He's going to have some time to fill into his body. He's going to need to gain about, 10 pounds. But if he's not getting that, separation that, he needs to be getting to be a top tier guy, he may have, that Kyle Pitts trajectory, similar until he can get his feet wet and maybe fill into his body a little bit here. I was expecting him to test a lot better. So I'm moving cautiously. I'm not as laid back as some of the guys I know and talk about that are more of like the Harold Fannin truthers. I'm a little less optimistic about his outlook right now.
Well, it's funny. There's a wall. When I look at the tight end wall for Tyler Warren in round 1, I see the Jets at 7, Panthers 8, if they're sold on JT Sanders or not. The Saints, the Miami Dolphins could be a surprise with Jonnu Smith, but we've seen what happened with Michael Mayer and Brock Bowers. The Indianapolis Colts at 14. That's a wall of teams for tight end. And then there's a secondary tier of the Bengals at 17 and the Broncos at 20. This won't be first round, but if you take those teams in order and then subset them down to round 2 or round 3, those are some very appealing teams that if they come away, let's say it's the Bengals, let's say it's the Broncos, if they come away with Harold Fannin Jr., it's like The Godfather. Once I thought I was out, they pull me back in. Harold Fannin Jr. might be able to revive that a little bit. He had a great Senior Bowl, very good on the Zebra scores, even though the impression on people was really not the best. And then, of course, this combine is going to influence. The only thing I'll say is I don't know what I really want with a 4.63 Terrence Ferguson 40. I really don't. 0.88 of a second is not going to make or break the technique that I appreciate from Harold Fannin Jr., but we can read the room and we see a dip for Harold Fannin Jr., and I think we can judiciously, from a portfolio standpoint, split some areas where you can incorporate Harold Fannin Jr. And if you luck box into any of those 7 or 8 teams that I mentioned for tight end, that's a good opportunity there. But you could say, Mike, we were very bullish as a community, and now we're a little bit more bearish. So with that said, let's go bullish bearish.
0-1. M.O. Come on.
Very nice. So we've got bullish, bearish. I talked about Isaiah Bond. I saved it. There was more to talk about to the wide receiver position, but I wanted to save my bearish nature for Isaiah Bond. Last week, we looked right at Isaiah Bond from Texas as a player who could boost his stock big at the NFL Combine. Bond ran a 4.39, was claiming that he would break Xavier Worthy, his own teammate, a 4.21 Texas, a 4.21 40, which was a record. Not only did Bond not come close to the mark he claimed, but his very own teammate, Matthew Golden, currently came away with a 4.29 40, the highest of all wideouts at the Combine. Bond must have gotten word to declare, as he is only a junior. I'm very curious if he should have gone back for his senior season. Bond played 14 games in 2024, had 34 receptions, 540 receiving yards, and 5 touchdowns. From PFF, Bond was tied for 413 for 413th in deep yards with 89. So way down. Bond had a 70.3 receiving grade, only 2 deep catches. I'm trying to see what the appeal is to Bond for the NFL right now that it is definitive that he doesn't have the elite blazing speed we had hoped for. I talk all the time about how the NFL Combine needs to inform you further and not throw you off your initial evaluation. But heading into the Combine, this 40-yard dash was all that we wanted to see. If Bond breaks the record or even comes close to what Xavier Worthy had in the 4.21, we're having an entirely different conversation. Their narrative in scope is completely different. We can tell a story about Quinn Ewers or Steve Sarkisian's offense if we have that elite 40. Then all of a sudden we're making some excuses. There's ways that we can, well, you know what? It may not be what we thought it was at Texas for Bond. More benefit of the doubt, essentially. But that's out the window. The beauty of the Senior Bowl, the NFL Combine, Pro Days, is everyone gets to see athleticism that's independent from what the player was beholden to with their team. A good example, Mike, you brought up Mason Taylor. He got to do that gauntlet drill. You look at his LSU numbers, they're not through the roof. They're not something insane. But then you sit there and think, what could he do independent of an offense or being more featured in an offense? And we saw how smooth Taylor was in the gauntlet drill. Isaiah Bond ends up with the 20th ranked athleticism score at the NFL Combine. There is a score breakdown on NFL.com. They combine the production score with the athleticism score. And Bond he ends up ranking 14th among his 2025 wideouts. So you know where being 14th is good this year? Being a running back, not a wide receiver, where it is already a weaker class to begin with. We wanted that 40 to push Bond into that top 5, into that top 6 discussion. We just didn't get it. So for that, I am bearish on Isaiah Bond. Mike, you're bullish on Jaden Higgins. Big size. What do you got on him?
I got big size, and I got Jaden Higgins as once was my pre-combine sleeper, but after his incredible performance, he's no longer flying under the radar. 6'4", 214 pounds. He's got the ideal size for an NFL wide receiver. His 4.47 40-yard dash, it was impressive for someone of his size. His 39-inch vertical jump and his 10'8" broad jump place him in the 92nd percentile for the wide receivers. These athletic numbers combined with his rare 9.87 relative athletic score indicate that Higgins is a well-rounded, explosive prospect capable of making an impact at the next level. In 2024, he put up big numbers, 1,100 yards, 9 touchdowns. He's got the ability to perform at a high level in competitive conference. His 2.66 yards per route run is on another level, indicating his efficiency as he consistently maximizes every opportunity. Higgins, his 3.8 yards per reception after contact demonstrate his toughness and his ability to gain those extra yards. These stats point to a receiver who can create separation, win contested catches, and be a go-to option for NFL teams looking for a reliable target. One of Higgins' standout traits is his contested catch ability. He's got a 79 and a bit wingspan. He has natural advantage in fighting for passes in those tight windows. His hands are rock solid. It's evidenced by his 93% grade, and his low 3% drop rate is great. This makes him a reliable target, especially in crucial situations like red zone opportunities. Higgins may not be a burner down the field. His size, though, and his ability to track and catch the ball in tight coverages set him apart as a player who can thrive in those short to intermediate game, making him an intriguing fantasy asset. With his dominant performance at the Combine and his proven college production, Higgins has transformed from a sleeper to a top prospect. His ability to win contested situations combined with his size, athleticism, makes him a candidate to develop into a reliable wide receiver 2 in the NFL and potentially develop into a consistent, impactful receiver that is real, and he's making him a player worth targeting in dynasty leagues and beyond. So don't let this pre-combine status fool you. Higgins is ready to make his waves at the next level, and I'm excited to see where this guy lands in the draft here.
I love it. And he's just like this different type of archetype from somebody like Tedero McMillan. And why not go Jaden Higgins if you don't have that premium capital? Maybe we don't like to talk about it too much, but what about those teams in Dynasty where you traded away some of those earlier picks? You're contending, you don't have first, you don't have seconds. Maybe it's an early third that's going to allow you to land Jaden Higgins. Mike, how high do you think Jaden Higgins can go in the draft? Is there any shot? First round, is that delusional? Is it second round? What is it?
Well, I think the wide receivers could be getting pushed up the board a little bit here because of the lack of talent or, perceived talent at that position. I'm seeing that maybe the running backs could be getting pushed backwards. So a guy that maybe last year would have landed in the second round or the third round would maybe go now in the fifth round in this draft. So I could
Good.
honestly see some wide receivers start floating into these higher rounds and pushing these running backs back, which is unfortunate for these running backs if they don't make a team in the, a roster spot or get themselves in a role in the next 2 years, because a guy that could potentially have been a third round pick is now a fifth round pick and could just be done with after a year or two if he doesn't crack a roster right away. So I'm looking for this wide receiver room to start getting some looks, especially after what Golden did in this in the combine, what we saw from Jalen Noel at the combine, what we saw from Trey Harris at the combine. So these are guys that are going to start getting some buzz. And with the amount of depth there was at the running back position, I wouldn't be surprised of seeing a guy like Jaden Higgins go late second, early third day, you know what I mean? Day 3 type scenario. And if he gets that kind of capital, that would be a good situation for him.
One thing I want to mention on the receivers, I'm debating early. This is just a thought. Luther Burden, Emeka Ibuka, Alec Amaner, and Trey Harris. Those 4 wide receivers, I don't see so much in the pre-combine. Daniel Jeremiah, Bucky Brooks, Mox. I don't see them going in round 1. We'll see what happens post NFL combine. But between Burden, Ibuka, Harris, and Amaner, I would like to, I'm thinking about early, a bet even units where I spread it across those 4 getting selected in the first round, to where if I have even units, I'm going to come out ahead if I have the odds right on one of them hitting. If 2 of them hit, I'm going to be further ahead. Last year, Ricky Pearsall was plus 2,200, and a $5 bet won me over $100. So I'm kind of thinking of spreading it for them, but we will see. Maybe the cat will be out of the bag and their stock will be up to what you spoke to. Matthew Golden, I think, is now a sure lock to be in the first round. He's going to be closer to Ted McMillan. But this has been a lot of fun. Bullish Bearish. And now let's get into the Coach's Corner. All right, Deebo Samuel goes to Washington. The Commanders have been hyping up as getting new weapons in 2025. We've been on the Daniels train from the start. Now we've been saying the Daniels 2024 supporting cast will be the worst supporting cast he's ever had. It's only going to go up from here, and right now it is going up. The Commanders waste no time. They get Deebo Samuel for a 5th-round pick. Combine weekend, teams got together and used it like MLB does for winter meetings. Deebo Samuel, wide receiver 44 on the season last year, 29 years old, had a poor explosive rating, a 96.3 score for Deebo, ranked 44th on explosive rating at Player Profiler. Deebo, in his prime, used to be all about those explosive plays. Just ask his opponents. Here's some down numbers from last year. 48th in targets with 81 last year, 52nd in snap share, 84th in air yards, 46 in fantasy points per game at 10.2. What a drop. 44th in total route wins. Here's positives from 2023, what the Commanders are hoping to get back. Debo, 4th in total touchdowns with 12. 9th in yards after catch. 12th in fantasy points per game, 16.2. Big jump there. Discrepancy from 2024. From an efficiency standpoint, Debo this is such a big fall off. He was 2nd in fantasy points per route run. 1st in fantasy points per target at 2.74. Can Debo and the Commanders salvage some of that 2023 game in a push to the Super Bowl? On the other side of them, the NFC Championship game, their rival Eagles, they won 55-23. Debo is someone who has had success against the Eagles. My next prediction is the Commanders will bolster their running back room via the NFL draft. On the other side of this trade, the Niners, Juwan Jennings, Ayuk, Pearsall, they're left to be sorted out. George Kittle, of course, a locked-in tight end 3 overall. There are varying cases to be made for all 3 receivers. Juwan Jennings, can he sustain week-over-week production to be the wide receiver 1 in this offense? Last year, week 3, Jennings was wide receiver 1 overall. 2 weeks later, wide receiver 83. Week 11, Jennings was wide receiver 7. The next week, wide receiver 43. You catch the theme here. Week 14, wide receiver 6. Then the next week, Jennings was wide receiver 67. So the finishes are all over the map. Will Brandon Ayuk fully recover from his injury in a timely manner? For Ricky Pearsall, does he have enough to build off his late season production? Week 17, week 18, wide receiver 7 and 14. 18 total targets, 2 red zone targets, 2 touchdowns. Week 17, 8 catches, 141 yards. Week 18, 6 catches for a very nice 69 yards. So something to monitor in San Francisco, and things are turning way up for the just short of the Super Bowl Washington Commanders. On the DK Metcalf front, there was a lot of noise about DK Metcalf, Seattle Seahawks. Things are heating up. A trade for DK to the Green Bay Packers. JSN already taking the reins as wide receiver 1. This would really bolster the passing game through JSN in Seattle in 2025. DK would be the perfect pair with Jaden Reed. He offers Reed something similar to JSN, but just a less consistent manner, as we know. I would love to see Jordan Love get DK Metcalf. Right now, the Packers have picked 23 in round 1. It said the Seahawks would want the Packers' 23rd pick and Romeo Doubs or Dontavian Wicks. This just sounds like a dynasty trade. Hey, I want a player at the same position thrown in as well. How often in Superflex Dynasty leagues do you go by the adage, you get a QB back done when dealing one? So even if it's several tiers down, hey, I'm going to get Derek Carr back if I'm getting a boatload of picks for offloading Jalen Hurts, right? While DK Metcalf would provide a bigger target out wide, the last 4 seasons, DK has finished 4 fantasy points per game, 20th, 24th, 22nd, and 30th, respectively. Not since 2020 COVID era did we see DK had a 17-point per game performance, ranking him inside the top 12 at receiver. To DK's credit, 0 seasons below 900 receiving yards in his 6-year career, and he's played 15 games or more every single season. In 2024, DK was 10th in explosive rating, had a 118 score. That measures pass plays over 20 yards. DK was 1st in deep yards with 33, 9th in air yards, share at 40%, 10th in unrealized air yards while being 27th in total targets with 108, and 33rd in receptions at 66. 5 total touchdowns last year, the lowest of DK's career. As wide receiver 32 last year, if DK Metcalf can regress in the touchdown department and live in the 120 to 140 target range again, he presents a nice buy low candidate in Dynasty. DK will be 27 in his 7th year. Dynasty gamers suffer fatigue all the time, but late 20s wideouts who've had down years can present some of the best values. The way I see it, DK's numbers, and envision a story where his opportunity improves, the more I want to buy him in Dynasty. Acquiring him before a trade happens is a savvy move. As I was writing him up and looking into his stats, I was like, oh man, this isn't good. And then it just kind of got a little bit better and better if you can kind of tell yourself a story. Now, Mike, as far as Chef's Table,
Yeah, I'm gonna touch base here on the Matthew Stafford situation, and it looks like he's gonna be staying in LA after his contract restructuring. His fantasy value remains steady as a QB2 for 2025. Stafford is no longer a top tier fantasy quarterback. We know that, but his steady play and veteran leadership ensure that he can be a reliable backup or fill-in option for fantasy managers in 2025, especially in super flex leagues. He threw for 24 touchdowns in 2023, despite a slow start. And in 2024, decent season, was without Cooper Cup for most of the year, and it looks like he's going to be without him next year anyway as well. So they're going to have to, adjust to that. Now, Puka Nakua is the big winner here, in my opinion. After an explosive rookie year, Nakua is now poised to continue off his sophomore year, which he was a pretty good situation, even though he missed, 4 or 5 games at the beginning of the year. He still finished very respectable this year, and he is now going to be for sure in the conversation to be, probably one of the first 2 or 3 wide receivers off the board in redraft leagues next year. So look for him to be elite. Puka set a massive increase of production over his last 2 seasons. The likely departure of Cooper Cup only strengthens Nakua's value moving forward. Cup, who was dealing with ongoing injury concerns, he could be traded or released. Given the Rams cap situation and his age, Cup, if he does not leave, Nakua will still be the undisputed top receiver in that offense. The absence of Cup would also free up a massive amount of targets for Puka, positioning him to be the focal point of that passing game. This would further solidify him as a wide receiver one in fantasy and in Dynasty, with the potential to be the one overall next year. I don't see it being any different. I mean, Jamar Chase had a prolific season, but T. Higgins signing the tag is going to be another element that we're going to have to uncover here. And that just opens up the door for Puka to be potentially in the conversation to be the number one wide receiver off the board in redraft. So I'm looking for Nakua to be set up for a monster 2025 season, and fantasy gamers should be targeting him as a top priority. And he'll be hard to pry in dynasty leagues, but if you're drafting, I'd be looking for Puka in a lot of different areas now. What about you there, Jer?
If we were doing the exercise of Malik Neighbors and Puka Nakua's ADP would flip because of the change for Matthew Stafford, that just speaks to the point that you are making right now, Mike. It's going to be Puka Nakua just balling out. Stafford ends up staying. It's good for Puka. Would we have liked it for Malik Neighbors? Absolutely. But the tell is in the perception and what we thought would happen. And then what ends up firming and happening, we are counting it as we saw it. Puka Nakua is going to ball out, and it just solidifies Puka's ADP. Now, Mike, we got our top running backs in the class. We had 2 guys really show out, 2 teammates who will most likely not be teammates anymore, which is why we're going to debate tonight on Combat Zone. Quinshon Judkins and TreVeyon Henderson.
It's go time. It's go time. It's go time. We going up. We go.
All right. So we've got 2 players who they coincide so much as seniors. They got to play together. Quinshon Judkins, TreVeyon Henderson. Remember, Judkins, when he transferred at the time, people thought, why are you going to that backfield with TreVeyon Henderson? Judkins saw the vision. He became a national champion, and he got to showcase his talents on the highest stage while not getting run down. He and Henderson come to the NFL very fresh. Quinshon Judkins, 6 foot tall, 221 pounds. Background, high school, he had 3,000 rushing yards and 51 touchdowns his final 2 seasons. He was a 4-star recruit. He ended up choosing Ole Miss, of course. He ended up at Ohio State in the 2024 season. As a freshman at Ole Miss, 1,500 yards, over 17 touchdowns. He was first team All SEC. As a freshman, he led the SEC in that rushing. And then 3 years for him of 1,000 rushing yards or more. Touchdown equity, not a problem either. Quinshon Judkins was a bell cow or in a committee from 22 to 2024. Judkins had 16, 15, 14 for touchdowns. He had 3 in the national championship game, 2 rushing and 1 receiving, 100 yards on just 11 carries. PFF gave Judkins a 90 rushing grade in 2024, 1,060 rushing yards on 193 rushing attempts last season. Judkins, 14 touchdowns to Henderson's 10 in 2024. Imagine a scenario where Judkins is pulled apart from Henderson in the Ohio State offense last year. We would have been talking about easily 20-plus touchdowns in 2024. A lot like we talk about, hey, Derrick Henry's going to pound 20 touchdowns in for the Ravens. Granted, different archetype of running backs, but you see the vision with the opportunity. Now imagine an unadulterated opportunity for Judkins as he's gotten stronger as a running back heading into the NFL from his younger years in college. For strengths, he can break tackles. He can get yards after contact. He's very good at reading his blocks. 2 straight years of 22 receptions. We like to see the 20 reception mark get hit. And Judkins is just a versatile 3-down back. He offers that skill set. At the combine, people are going wild for Omarion Hampton. But you look at Judkins, he had a 4.48 40-yard dash, a 38.5 vertical jump, an 11-foot broad jump. His combine rank for athleticism at the running back position put him second in class. So, it's you're just pulling it off a little bit between Judkins and Henderson. But as we compare them, I'm very impressed with Quinshon Judkins, and he's really pushed himself into that 3-4 discussion. And as you had said earlier, Mike, Caleb Johnson might be filling out that 5th spot of that big 5, but definitely Quinshon Judkins made a great name for himself. What do you have, though, for us if we want to consider TreVeyon Henderson?
Well, honestly, I was surprised that you went with Judkins, and I guess maybe, the hot name after the combine was where you headed, because I know you were always really big on Omarion Hampton. So it was exciting to see you pick Judkins in this situation when I put the show sheet together, because I've been a truther on Henderson for a couple weeks now.
Oh, Mike, I got Hampton ahead of him, but yeah. I thought let's fight teammate wise.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That was
you keep cooking.
Yeah, I will cook, because I had a Henderson at my number 2 spot for a couple weeks now. Hampton and him floated back and forth, and Johnson was my early number 2 in, I'd say, January, but things floated away when people were getting on the Johnson train. I was getting off of it, so it was kind of neat to see to see that layout. But now I've just, it's hard to dismiss what Henderson did, as a young running back coming out of high school and then getting into, Ohio State of all places, right? So, he's got an elite explosiveness and big playability. Henderson's most standout trait is his explosiveness. He's only 5'10", but he's over 200 pounds. Huge numbers there. He's got the breakaway speed and the ability to hit a home run at any point. He's got a 6.8 yards per carry average as a freshman season and a 7.1 yards per catch as a senior. So, he's a good pass catcher. He's got great, traits if he gets that full workload, which I'm not expecting him to get at the NFL level. And honestly, I don't want him to get that full workload. I see him as a very similar prospect to like a Jahmyr Gibbs and how he's going to round out an NFL offense. He's a better all-around versatile weapon than Judkins. Henderson excels in both rushing and receiving. He's proven to be a very capable pass catcher, 27 catches, 4 touchdowns as a freshman, and he's further improved his pass blocking. While Judkins can be effective as a receiver, Henderson is just a more well-rounded skill set, and I think that's going to play more into his draft capital, because I think both players are likely to go in the 2nd or maybe 3rd round of this draft, depending on how it's get pushed out. Like I mentioned earlier in the show, these wide receivers could start pushing these running backs down because of the depth of this class. Henderson's skill set might give him the edge in terms of where he's selected, his ability to be an every down back, and he's got excellent speed, vision as a backfield weapon. Judkins has the size, he's got the strength, but Henderson's athletic profile and versatile skill set might push him in a more favorable landing spot, enhancing his fantasy potential from day one. He's got durability and consistency. Despite only having made minor injuries and setbacks in his sophomore year, Henderson's performance has been consistently elite. He showed resilience, bouncing back with 926 yards and a double-digit TD in 2023 after that injury season. And then when they brought in competition last year in a tough conference, he was able to perform still. And, I think that's just foreshadowing what the NFL is doing nowadays. Judkins and Henderson are going to prove themselves to be valuable weapons. But I think that Henderson might have a little bit more longevity because of how much he's going to be used. And then his explosive playmaking ability, he could be that next Jahmyr Gibbs type protocol. So while Judkins has the strength as a power runner, Henderson's explosive playmaking ability, receiving prowess, consistency, and the potential draft capital appeal and his overall skill set make him a superior choice for me. And he's my running back 2 in the class. He's got the potential to be a potential workhorse, and he's got the upside for fantasy, especially in PPR formats. But ultimately, however, it will come down to draft capital and landing spot, and these factors will play a critical role in determining the immediate and long-term fantasy value on not just these players, but honestly, every single player we talked about in the segment here today, talking about this combine, because the combine is one thing, but at the end of the day, draft capital reigns supreme, and that's what's going to get players on the field. It's going to get them in our fantasy lineups, and that's what NFL teams covet, and they're going to have a longer leash if they have better draft capital. So let's look at that and continue to do that. Jer, what a show, man.
Hey, I'll just say, with what you were saying, with your Henderson play on sliding down, you talk about erections lasting longer than 4 hours. If TreVeyon Henderson, this will help some soreness. You know where I'm going with this, Mike. This will help some soreness of not getting your 3-peat. TreVeyon Henderson goes to the Kansas City Chiefs. It would just be like pants off, man. You would just be
bricked up in the cement down.
Everyone would just be like, hallelujah. So in the same will go for Judkins as it slides down to these bullish spots. But great point on that. And 2 through 5, Hampton to Caleb, it'll be malleable on what we have as far as landing spot. But to your point, TreVeyon Henderson really did, shift into the gear, pull himself up big time in that top 3, top 4. And, same thing with Amari and Hampton. But you have been, I got to tell you, folks, if you've been paying attention, it's free to pay attention. Mike has been on TreVeyon Henderson from the jump. So you've been bullish on him, and it's got to be rewarding for you to see number 1 in athleticism score for the running backs, TreVeyon Henderson. So hat tip to you there, Mike. Good combat zone, good show. Folks, stay locked in. We have some prisoner of the moment sentiments that are going across the fantasy industry. We have some takes that are refined and getting better, some information that we're processing and going back to the drawing board. The combine doesn't shape everything. It just informs further. And now we're going to get to pro days. And then, of course, we'll have some free agency, which will muddy up. Hey, we have free agency, and maybe the Chargers sign Najee Harris. And then all these bullish landing spots we had for running backs may take a little bit of a hit. So right now is very idyllic as far as the setting goes.
Oh, yeah.
So
don't get me wrong. I mean, definitely, Najee Harris is going to be taking one of these landing spots of one of these guys. Like it's inevitable. Like it's going to happen. And it just, hopefully it's not the Chargers or the Vikings or like a premium spot like that where, one of these guys are going to thrive. But, honestly, I was listening to a show this morning. I'm not sure which one it was, but they were talking. I think it was Theo's, and when he had Dave Kluge on, and they were talking about that. And yeah, like, you know, they're gonna take a spot, and Najee Harris is gonna be in a lineup, and yeah, it's inevitable. But you know what? Some of these veteran running backs, they're not gonna have jobs come July, and this running back class is for real, and it's something that we're gonna maybe be talking about, similarly to this 2017 class that had Alvin Kamara, Christian McCaffrey, and so on. So yeah, let's go.
Let's go. Hey, we will see you next week.
Hey, I want to thank you for being part of this broadcast. If you have any thoughts on it, leave a comment. If you enjoyed it, make sure you leave a like. And if you want to see more shows on the Player Profiler channel, subscribe to it. That's how we know you want more.